Are you all set, all set?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Michael Gendre. I'm a college professor. I teach philosophy and ethics. And I've been very involved in fighting against Common Core since 2012-13, when I came to realize how bad a set of standards the Common Core standards were. And so we need to repeal. We have the option now, finally, to have a ballot question on the ballot. And the ballot question is to end Common Core in Massachusetts and to replace it with the better standards that we had before Common Core was actually adopted by the Department of Education in the summer of 2009. So going back to our standards which we own, which are better standards, and upgrading those standards, that brings control back to our school districts, to our teachers, to our educators, and to the parents, because then the parents have the ability to talk about the curriculum and their money and the money that is being spent on students. So this is a very important ballot question that when people are aware of what Common Core is and they understand that there's a choice, then they will understand that it's in their interest, it's in the interest of their kids and themselves to go back to our Massachusetts standards and keep the ball rolling on education, which is a top achievement in Massachusetts. So let me explain what the Common Core standards were, are. The Common Core standards, they're a set of standards that are federally arranged by the Gates Foundation and associated entities that have been pushed without a vote, obviously in Congress, U.S. Congress, nor in the state houses, because it's not allowed to be done that way. So they circumvented this any legal process. So without any vote whatsoever, they managed to get into the school districts of a vast number of states who accepted the grant money, and then once the grant money of Race to the Top was accepted, then they were kind of stuck with the Common Core, which actually they had not seen when they accepted the grant money for Race to the Top. And those standards are objectionable on at least 2 counts. The first count is that mathematics makes it very complicated to educate a child in this Common Core standards mode, because they constantly use different algorithms. In other words, ways of doing additions, multiplications, divisions, and so on. So the children are confused because they have to give one specific answer using a specific method and not another method. So a right answer would be considered not right, in other words wrong, if it's not arrived at through the algorithm, specific algorithm that is desired by the teacher or by the system, by the Common Core standards at that point in time. So kids are delayed in their progress because they're forced to look at these different ways of doing things. That's number one. Now, that's at the beginning of math education for kids in K through 12. So we're talking about the first few grades. Now, for the end of the math instruction, so toward the 10th and 12th grades, it's not adding up because they're not being led to Algebra 1, okay? Calculus 1, I'm sorry. They're ending with a weak Algebra 1, and they're not really going into a calculus. So that means that the STEM careers, the science, technology, engineering, and math careers, are actually precluded, are not opened up anymore by the Common Core standards. They're actually delaying and not opening up the STEM careers, which is insane. So maybe a school district may be able to compensate, but basically in the country or in Massachusetts, unless some district manages to pull out or instruct somehow their students who want to do a STEM career, that they'll be provided the instruction. Otherwise, it's not going to be there. So that's a serious problem if you think of it. At the very beginning, kids are confused by the different algorithms, and at the end, they still don't have what is expected to go into the STEM careers.
So they're not college ready.
So essentially, they're not college ready. Okay, and there are all kinds of other issues with the college readiness concept, which really is not exactly a very good concept to have. So, what about English, ELA? Well, there's also a big problem there, because instead of doing the traditional things that work, which are instruction with English lit and American lit classics, you know, the great books and novels and epic stories and poems and, you know, Shakespearean, Elizabethan plays and tragedies and comedies and all of this. Instead of that, this is cut in half. And then at least half, maybe more than half, is informational texts. Now, these informational texts are light, okay? They will not teach vocabulary, they will not teach deep thoughts, they will definitely not awaken a child to a broad problem. It might be just a passing, you know, problem of, you know, river overflowing, or some kind of dump problem, or some kind of seasonal allergy thing, you know, which you'll find in the local newspapers. So these are topical things that are not uninteresting, but are really not key things that kids will learn really important things from in the English class. So, you know, if you think of how little they're going to be challenged by these readings, it's obvious that the kids need to be, well, sort of prodded along, and they talk between themselves, and they form little groups, and they have a lot of specific writing assignments. There's much more writing assignments than there are reading assignments. Now, think of it. Someone really becomes good at figuring out things conceptually after they read a lot, not after they write a lot, right? Mm-hmm. It's just commonsensical that you develop your vocabulary, you develop your awareness of issues if or when you have read in the first place, and you've been challenged to read, and then you can discuss things you can write. But first and foremost is reading and being challenged to express what you read and what you thought about the reading.
But you also become inspired.
And you can then become inspired. Yeah, inspiration comes from having immersed yourself in a piece of creative writing that just brings out all kinds of issues that you are ready for at your age, but it's not informational, it's just cultural, and it's interesting, generally interesting. So that is kind of gone, okay? So cut it in half, and you cut in half the vocabulary, or maybe not quite. But also what is striking is the fact that the context of those texts is, by the standards, is pushed out. So you're supposed to do a cold reading of a text, which is a paragraph. Let's call it a paragraph, because that's not really a text. A text is like a page, not like, you know, half a page. And from this paragraph, you are not supposed to talk about the context of the author, of the piece, or of the time in which it was written. So, you know, you take out the strong connections that this text has to history, to people, to events, to, I mean, really everything. You know, you say it's context-free reading. So that makes no sense, absolutely no sense. I can tell you that as an academic, I find this shockingly stupid, really amazingly stupid, amazingly erroneous, completely absurd, that you kind of tell the teachers, oh, by the way, you don't need to know anything or much about the context. Don't look stupid to this child who asks a question, but basically you don't have to know about the context. So that means that the teachers are brought down in terms of expectations and in terms of their own training. Okay, so it's kind of shocking that the Common Core standards would lower the level of expectations and performance of teacher.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
What is the length and period of time for the students which they will be, the Common Core actually covers? Through being seniors in high school?
Yeah.
And how early would that?
Kindergarten.
It's K through 12. It's an
The whole-
entire,
whole process.
it's the entire stretch of time when a child is in the public schools. So, and it
So they've rolled out a K-12 program for math and English,
yeah,
right? And now they're working on science and history, probably, right? I know
Well, yes.
science was in
Yeah.
the works. So they're going K through 12, and then they're doing slices of the
But, yeah,
courses.
as I understand it, so we can clarify, you don't read books, you read a paragraph or two.
yeah,
The example I remember hearing was the Gettysburg Address would be studied, not in context of who wrote it or what was happening that caused him to write it, but it'd be an isolated speech. And you would be using things to decipher and infer from just the speech.
yeah.
What is it about? Where would you find information? Or it's a chart with a paragraph, and it's how do you find information there, but you can't use any other context for that.
Right, exactly. So you can see that little by little, it's taking out the substance, the content, really, the content. And it's allowing kids to, they go to school and then they figure out, how to correlate a few things, but in the end, they're not being taught content at all. They're not taught certain important facts. They're not taught how some words have to be used as applicable to certain things or certain works or certain events or certain processes in history or in cultural history.
What do you would think about English then? They never have a choice of what they read. They have to just read the informational text. Is
No, it's
that correct?
50-50 instead of,
Yeah, 50-50. But let me tell you one thing. In the standards, there is no standard that applies to the English language proper. In other words, teachers are not supposed to go into the roots and the origins of half of the English words which are Germanic. Half of them are essentially Latin or French. That is not supposed to be talked about, right? So that means that, and then the Greek stems and the Greek words also through the Latin or on their own are not even talked about. So that means that there is a whole cultural context that's actually not being covered. So if a teacher spends an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or 4 hours explaining the roots and the stems and the prefixes and the suffixes and all the rest that come from the Latin, antecedent, sedent, antecedent, precedent, precedent, okay, president, all these words clearly could be explained to students by someone who's taken one course in Latin or not even a full course. It's possible and it's in fact necessary to explain the English language in terms of its sources, right? The Anglo-Germanic source and the French-Latin source and the Greek source. All of that should be talked about. But because it's not included in the standards, then a teacher would be pushed to, or encouraged to not even bring that up. So you can see that it is detrimental to a child to go through the Common Core standards. And the teachers who know better, in general, teachers know better, they are forced to ignore the things they know they should be teaching. So teachers are upset. They're absolutely upset. So the predicament is this, at this point, is that this is a set of very flawed standards that were written by people who knew nothing about education. I mean, the bottom line is that. And they were forced through the states by this race to the top system, money. And the two people who would have had who had knowledge of how bad these standards were, and in math it was James Milgram from Stanford, and in English it was Sandra Stotsky from Massachusetts and the University of Arkansas. These two refused to sign off on the standards because they knew they were not tested, they had never been proven, they were not benchmarked, and there was no rigor in there because they were confusing. So the word rigor that is used, rigorous standards by the pro-Common Core people, well, rigorous really means vigorous because they force teachers to do things that are kind of stressful, so the kids end up being stressed out, the parents are stressed out. I mean, that's what the word rigorous means. It means that their kids are stressed out. It's not because it's good. It's not good. Okay? So those two people, Milgram and Stotsky, they refused to sign off on the standards. They thought they were inappropriate. They were essentially doing a lousy job of doing what teachers know has to be done. Because all the other people in that validation committee had absolutely zero experience teaching. I mean, it's scandalous. It's absolutely scandalous that this was passed with zero experience in the art of teaching, the pedagogy, the actual pedagogy by the people who wrote these things. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Is the Massachusetts Teachers Union, are they in support of it or are they against it?
Well, the teachers are generally against it. There is a number of teachers who are co-opted by the Department of Education to tinker and adapt and make the things talked about in the classrooms more palatable to them. So then they're for it, so to speak. They think there's something maybe innovative there. Well, yeah, the kids maybe are a little more free to do things, but in the end they're not taught the things that they should be taught. So that's the problem with Common Core. They're not taught the things they should be taught. So when it came out in 2010 and gradually has been implemented, people were not sure. They waited and they tried it, but then parents realized that the math was ridiculous, that all these different things were not adding up, and it was costly. And then the testing was another layer of complication because the testing was.
And don't they have to hire special people?
Well, yeah. So all of that, yeah.
$100,000.
Yeah. So it goes into all kinds of levels, and testing agencies are making money from this. Plus, there's a lot of data collection, data mining on the kids' progress, but also on the kid's life, on the kid's health, on the kid's environment at home. So all kinds of personal questions about religion, about parents, about sexuality, I mean, all these things that should absolutely not be part of what this school figures out, it's not part of what, that's actually also part of Common Core. So there are all kinds of layers of Common Core that are bad, that were not needed, that are not needed to educate a child, and that's why parents are up in arms, and teachers really generally don't like Common Core. Okay.
So, can you give me an update on what has been happening with the petition initiative drive? And how are people reacting to you coming out again? Because I'm sure the general public doesn't get it.
Well, the general public, whenever they're asked and presented with the facts that we have in Massachusetts standards that brought us to be #1 in the country, and this started in 93-94 with the Massachusetts Education Reform Act, which was gradually implemented and actually by Senator Stotsky. And then it brought Massachusetts to be #1 consistently, like over 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and we're still #1 but decreasing. Okay. So because of what was done in Massachusetts, we have a benchmark of successful achievement. And the states, by the way, like Michigan, who now want to get rid of Common Core officially through their legislative process, what are they going to replace the Common Core with? Well, surprise, surprise, by the Massachusetts standards predating Common Core. So it's the frameworks, Massachusetts defined standards, which of course they will adapt to their own needs, but that's what they're going to do. They're going to use the Massachusetts standards. So we are the golden standard for educational research and education, I should say. And basically the rest of the country should have adopted the Massachusetts standards and not gone to Common Core. They would have benefited greatly. But then there would have been less money to be made, and Bill Gates and the foundation's connected outfits would not have been making as much money. So you can say, I think truthfully, that the Common Core was set in motion by people who thought they had to revolutionize American education, number one, because in some states it was very bad. Granted, that's true. But then they also wanted to bring in all kinds of testing methods and not really caring much about teachers, because these people who wrote the standards are not teachers. So how could they care about teachers if they're not teachers?
But they were paid also.
Yeah, so there's money. So my point of...
They said if you implement this, we're going to give you $500 million.
Yeah, the bottom line is you follow the money.
Right.
That's okay. So the question, following up on the question, so we started this petition about a year ago. I mean, it was formalized in summer, and then we actually started collecting signatures in the fall, throughout the late summer into the fall, and we collected over 100,000 signatures. Now, out of the 100,000 signatures, about 85 or 80 plus were certified, and so we were way above the threshold of signatures needed to do the first round, basically. Now, so once that was accepted, brought to the Secretary of State's office and so on, then the Massachusetts legislature had the option of accepting the petition and to turn it into a law, so from a bill into a law. But they also had the ability to not pick it up and send it to committee, and then it just would not be picked up by them. And so that's what happened. They did not pick it up, so it went to committee, and now what we have to do is collect another 11,000 certified signatures. So we're shooting for 25,000 signatures, raw signatures, which then will be certified, and then we bring them to the office of the Secretary of State, and then we will be then on the ballot in the fall.
I thought that they can't be the same people, though. How is that going to
They cannot be the same people. That is correct. So, for example...
if you signed the first time, you can't sign this time.
Yes, you're right. You're right. However, it must be pointed out that about 20% of the raw signatures were not validated, were not certified. So it could be that a person, knows that they signed, but they were actually not certified. So they could sign again, if it is legible and now they're doing it right, then it will be certified the second time. But we don't know who it is. So, we're accepting just about everybody, who's willing to sign. I mean, obviously, I signed, and so I signed very legibly. I expect that my signature was certified, so I'm not going to bother signing again.
So are you having trouble getting signatures?
No, it's the same petition. It has a CC. It's the same petition.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So what we're asking people is to print or sign, but actually print is better. So if people want to print, but if the signature is, if people want to sign, that's fine. But if the signature is
illegible,
confused, yeah, you absolutely need to have it printed.
Yeah, I used to have people do signature and then print their name.
Yeah, that's the right way.
Just because then...
So that's how it goes. So we're collecting this additional batch of signatures, and we need people to do that as part of a volunteering group to have the numbers right. So that's the big thing. Okay. Now I expect we're going to have at the end of June, we're going to have all the numbers, And then between the end of June and the fall, what we need to do is educate people about Common Core, because there are a lot of people who kind of know nothing about Common Core. And these are the voters. And so we have a set of facts here. Common Core is a failure. Massachusetts score are already falling. And so it's asking to vote yes November 8th to end Common Core in Massachusetts.
Now, isn't the question even a little weird? Come on, vote,
Well,
you want to end it, but you're voting yes?
It's
Yes to
often the
end it.
case. It's often the case that a question, you have to know what the answer to your question is. So yes, we want to end Common Core. Okay, that's what we need to repeat to people.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you have other questions. So, like on the North Shore, I'm willing to go to other places to explain this to people. We need maybe a little more time.
Can you just put state your email for the
Yeah,
record?
sure. So my email is my name, Michael Gendre, at AOL.com. So it's MICHAEL GENDRE at AOL.com. And my phone number is 978-273-7772.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.